Okay, so let's start with the second generation model here. So we have seen some of the criticisms of the first generation model, and because of those criticisms, we will have to think whether we can use a different model which can be more realistic or which can support some of the crises. For example, if you are taking the East Asian crisis in 1997, we have seen that during that time in East Asia there was no significant budget deficit, not necessarily there's a significant increase in money supply, or there's no significant changes in or pressure on the currency as such. So that's why whatever factors we have mentioned so far about the fiscal deficit and so on, that might not be the only solution or only reasons which can cause crisis. So therefore, we need to consider other models as well, which can essentially explain the crisis. For example, the East Asian crisis that we observed. So it says that according to the second generation model, they say that no, the crisis can happen due to many reasons. It is not about fixed exchange rate, fiscal deficit, the money growth. It is that should not be the only reason. Okay, so there could be many other reasons. It could be a wide range of reasons. And when you talk about, let's say, 5 or 7 or 8 reasons, then the speculators, they look at all the reasons together. They see, okay, out of these 8 or 9 factors, which one is causing the problem in the economy? So if they say that, okay, if there are only 4 or 5 factors which are problematic, then they may say that no, that's enough. But sometimes you look at sometimes there could be 2 or 3 factors which could be very significant. Then they may say that, well, I don't have to wait for all the 9 causes to happen, even if these are 2 or 3 factors which are showing enough signal, which are giving enough signal that this country is struggling. Then because of those one or 2 reasons, they can withdraw their money. They can leave the country. So that's why it is not completely known whether the crisis will happen, whether it will happen for factor A, B, C, or it will happen due to D, E, F, or something like that. So it says that there could be a wide range of factors, and within that wide range of factors, then how people perceive those factors. Somebody will say A is important, somebody will say no, D is important, somebody will say no, the XYZ is important. So when you believe that XYZ factors are important, if I also believe that the XYZ factors are important, when a significant number of people, they believe that the XYZ factors are more important than ABC, then there will be a crisis. So therefore, we cannot really pinpoint one particular factor like fiscal deficit, fixed exchange rate. We cannot figure out it like that. It is the number of things. You have got a list of things. Within that, the speculators they develop their expectation that, okay, out of this list of 10 things, these 5 or 6 things are going wrong. So that means there will be a crisis. Okay, so it's all about your expectation. So here they say it is the interaction between the expectation and the actual outcome. So that's why this is called self-fulfilling. If, as I said, if I think that XYZ is more important and you also think XYZ is more important than ABC, then if there are number of players, number of speculators in the economy, they also feel in the same way that XYZ, these factors are important and they are not doing well, that means there will be a crisis. Then if you think that there will be a crisis, then you act. Because of your action, then the crisis happens. Okay? Then we call it a self-fulfilling. You think something to happen, then you act on it, then that thing happened, right? I gave you the example of the umbrella versus rain. You forecast rain, then you start buying umbrella, then because of the buying umbrella, the price of umbrella goes up. So the price of umbrella did not go up because of the rain. The price of umbrella went up because you all started buying umbrella beforehand. Okay? So you are causing it to happen. That is called self-fulfilling here. Okay? Right. So that's why the expectation is very important here. Okay. Now, in the second generation model, let's see what are those expectations. Okay? Here we are saying that a crisis can happen even in the absence of the policy mistake. Okay? There might not be any policy mistake, but still the crisis may happen. Okay? So, for example, one example is like your attendance here, right? That taking attendance is a good policy. Okay? You know that, okay? Because taking attendance means you're coming to the lecture, you're attending, you get 10% or so on. But still, things happen, like somebody signing for somebody else, which is a fraud, okay? So the fraudulent activities are taking place even if there's a good intention behind this, okay? So it is not about the policy itself. Maybe the government has got a good policy in mind, that the fiscal deficit, yes, fiscal deficit can have a good intention to maintain the good GDP, to maintain the full employment, to help the economy. But to do that, because you are running fiscal deficit with good intention, but the investors, they are reading it differently. They are reading it, okay, this government is running fiscal deficit, oh my goodness, this government is extravagant, this government cannot manage their own money, that this government will collapse, there will be high inflation. So they are talking about all these things. But they are not looking at that there is a good intention behind it, that to increase the GDP, okay? So that's why even if you have, the crisis can happen even if you do not have any policy in stake. It is all about the perception, how you perceive that, okay? What you want to do with that, whatever action the government is taking place, okay? So for example, in 1992-93, okay, what we call the exchange rate mechanism, the ERM, these developed countries, we are talking about the European countries here, they did not have, they had the fixed exchange rate, but they did not have the high fiscal deficit. So they are not extravagant. But still, they just had the fixed exchange rate, and the speculators, they thought that this fixed exchange rate cannot be maintained. But there is no increase in money supply. There is no increase in money supply. There is no foreign currency reserve problem. There is no fiscal deficit problem. But still, there is a fixed exchange rate, and you think that this fixed exchange rate cannot be sustained. That yes, government is keeping the price of tomato fixed. Okay, so you know that the price of tomato is fixed. It is fixed exchange rate. Okay, the government is producing tomato, government is selling tomato, the price is fixed. But you think that the price of tomato will go up in future, because you may think that the next year, because of the global warming, the weather will change, not that much tomato will be produced. So although the government has got a good intention to keep the price of tomato fixed, still you are expecting that next year the government will not be able to maintain this fixed price. That is your expectation. And because of the external thing, because of, you may predict that the next year it will be hotter, so not that much tomato will be produced. Okay, that's your expectation. So therefore, sometimes you may not have any problem with the government, but still people may attack the currency. Okay, like we have seen in case of this 1993, the exchange rate mechanism in the European countries, the attack on the exchange rate system, the fixed exchange rate system. So many people, they just withdraw money. Okay, so therefore, in that sense, the first international model cannot support those. Okay, you can Google search Black Wednesday. Okay, it is called the Black Wednesday when the British pound was attacked. It's called the Black Wednesday during this 1992-93 attack. So because of the significant decline in the value of British pound at that time. Okay. So here we say that, but speculators, they still attacked. So there is no fundamental problem. Still, they thought that this fixed price cannot be maintained for various reasons. It could be due to inflation problem. It could be due to current account problem. So we are not talking about fiscal deficit. We are not talking about money supply. We are not talking about reserve. I'm talking about current account. I'm talking about inflation. So still, your currency can be attacked maybe because of inflation, because of current account, not because of the first generation model that we have discussed so far. Okay. So that's why we said, and after this attack, many European countries, the currency lost its value overnight. Okay. So then to avoid the crisis, what you essentially do, you try to raise the interest rate before the crisis. Okay. So because if you raise the interest rate, it is very likely that the speculators will not leave the country, because you are making your deposit, your own currency deposit, attractive by raising the interest rate. Okay, so that is one way. So we say that you can increase the interest rate ex ante. Ex ante means before the crisis, and ex post If it is ex post, that means after the crisis. So if you raise the interest rate after the crisis, maybe it is too late. Okay? So normally what you do, you raise it beforehand so that you're sending a signal to the market that no, don't go. I know that you have got a tendency to withdraw your investment, but I'm giving you high return. I'm raising the interest rate even beforehand. Before you leave, I'm opening the door for you. I'm making your investment more attractive. So come back, stay back. Okay? So here you raise the interest rate even before the crisis. Okay? And if you do that, then so that you can maintain the fixed exchange rate. Okay, so you can maintain the fixed exchange rate so that the pressure, because if the foreigners, if they take their money out, then you cannot maintain the pay, you cannot maintain the fixed exchange rate. So to maintain the fixed exchange rate, you raise the interest rate, so you maintain the fixed exchange rate or the pegged rate. Okay, but so that you can avoid the attack. So in this sense, yes, the interest rate can address or can prevent the crisis according to this. For example, we say that, well, in 1992, the Swiss central bank, they increased the lending rate to 500%. So even after 500% increase, they could not prevent the crisis. So you're offering 500%, if there's a 500% interest rate. But the speculators, if they don't trust you, they will not stay with you, okay? So it's like you're having a boyfriend or girlfriend, you can buy good gifts for your boyfriend or girlfriend. If they don't want to stay with you, you are just delaying the thing. You can offer them lots of gifts. Take them for dinner, lunch and dinner in nice places. But if they don't want to stay with you, your partner will leave you eventually, right? So you can raise it, okay, here, but then eventually you'll have to give up. Because the speculators, they don't want to stay with you. What can you do? Your partner doesn't want to stay with you. You can offer them lots of gifts. Okay? So that's why in this kind of situation, whether the country or the speculators, they will stay in their country or not will depend on their mentality. Because if you have already made up your mind that you will not stay with your boyfriend or girlfriend, if you already made up your mind, then the no gift will work. Okay? Even the 500% increase in the gift also will not work. Okay? Because it's a mentality. You don't like your partner anymore. You leave it anyway. Okay? That's what we have observed here. So you can try here. Theoretically it should work, but in reality it did not work. Okay? So and then the Mexico also realigned its exchange rate peg beforehand. Okay? So they realigned. Okay? What you do when you think that okay, if you like in this example, I say that okay, if you got the exchange rate which is, you say that when the exchange rate is like that, then people will buy dollar, right? Okay, because ideally the exchange rate should have been here, 32, but it is at 28. So that's why the people will buy dollar. Okay, then what you do? You say that okay, now from tomorrow it is 33. Okay, you make it 33. You just change it. That is a new level. New exchange rate here, 33. That is your new fixed exchange rate here. No more 28. Okay, that is now your fixed exchange rate. Fixed exchange rate here. Okay, new rate. You can do that, but still people will buy dollar because they don't want to stay with you. Very simple. Okay, so you can realign, you can readjust the pay, the fixed rate, but still, if the people think that no. The problem is your inflation, the problem is your current account because you're not earning enough export. You're not exporting that much to earn dollar. You're importing too much. You've got a balance of payment problem or you've got a problem with the banks. So if they lose trust in you, then if they don't like you, they'll leave in any way. Okay? So that is what, this is a summary of that. Okay? So what is happening? It is about, yes, there is a conflict of interest because the government is trying to solve the GDP problem, but then it is creating problems somewhere else, which the speculators they don't like. Okay, you're solving problem A, but the speculators are looking at problem B. but you're not solving problem B, because you cannot solve all the problem at the same time. If you're a government, you cannot solve the GDP, economic, or whatever, the unemployment, or exchange rate, inflation, current account, balance of payment, FDI. You cannot solve all the problem at the same time. So you are focusing on something, but that is creating a conflict here. Okay. So there is the conflict of interest, and that is mismatching the expectation. The foreigners, the investors are expecting you to do B, C, D. You are doing X, Y, Z. Because you think that is good for me. I want to do X, Y, Z, that is good for my people. So you are doing something for your people, but then the foreigners, the speculators, they're not liking it. They're telling, no, why are you doing X, Y, Z? You should do A, B, C. Then they attack. So it is the difference. It is a dance between the expectation and the conflict of interest. It is this swinging, okay? Sometimes you please them, sometimes you please them. Okay, sometimes you do something for your own economy, sometimes you do it for the foreigners, like you raise the interest rate, okay, to please the foreigners. Then sometimes you increase the GDP as well. So you just switch between the two, okay? So that's why we say that it is all about the market sentiment. If the market sentiment is adverse, if you have got a bad market sentiment, then that causes the crisis. It is not your action as such. It is the sentiment about your action. Like I say, the sentiment behind attendance was good, but people still abuse the system because it is their sentiment. Okay, people think that, okay, what's the point if I sign for 2, 3, sign this attendance sheet for my friends? Okay, it is the sentiment. They think that, okay, because I'm not looking at it, right? They see that nobody is seeing it, let me sign for 4 or 5 of my friends in the attendance list, and they'll get some mark. Okay? Because that is their sentiment, because they think that nobody is observing them. Okay? So that is their sentiment, that I can get away by signing for my friends every day. And they do it. Okay? But so you have got the actual action, okay? So then I realized that, okay, there is a conflict. That awarding 10% mark for the attendance has got a conflict. Ideally, the good thing about it that then it should encourage students to come. That is the positive thing. But the negative thing that some students are getting 10% without coming. So that is a conflict here. Okay, if I put this to you, okay, when there is a registration here, so the positive part is that it should encourage people to come attend and to listen to the lecture and to learn something, so that the money that you are spending, your parents are spending on you, the tuition fee, is worth. So that at the end of 4 years, you get a good job. That is the whole purpose of taking attendance, the learning, right? It is not about learning economics. You learn various other things when you attend the lecture, when you come to the university. But then the downside is that some people, they are getting 10% mark without coming because their friends are signing for them. Okay? So then what happens? Then the system will collapse. What is the consequence? From next year, there will not be any mark for attendance. I will completely abolish it. 0 mark. No mark for attendance. Whether you come or you don't come, that is not my headache, because you are paying the tuition fee. That is your loss. If you don't come, that is your loss. It's my loss. Okay? Very simple for me. I see it like that. Because I'm not paying for your tuition. Okay? So that's why it is about that adverse sentiment that the policies could be good, but if the people, if the speculators, they think that no, somebody is abusing it and this system cannot be maintained, cannot be sustained, they will attack, they will leave it. Like I said, from next year, I just cancel it completely. Okay? So that's how their sentiment can affect. They will attack the currency here. Okay? Okay. So now the problem is that government has got 2 objectives here: to maintain the peg or to go for to maintain the GDP. Both are important for the government. Maintaining peg is important, fixed taxation is important equally. Having the high GDP is also important. But the problem is that it is creating problem here. For example, the government wants to minimize the fluctuation. Okay, so if you have got the GDP here, okay, so you've got your long-term GDP here, and then if you've got the actual GDP, which is going like this, then it is going like that, it is going like that, then like this, okay, like this, okay. that the problem is that, so this is GDP, so this is a business cycle here. So it is this part which is causing the problem. Or even this part which is causing the problem here. Yeah, so it could be, there could be some positive, some negative here as well, okay? Let's say it's like that, okay? So sometimes you're close to your full employment here. But the problem is sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up, then again it goes down. So it is that fluctuation that you don't want to see. Because it is impacting the employment, because GDP is directly related to the employment here. So government wants to reduce the fluctuation in output, number one. At the same time, it also wants to avoid the fluctuation in exchange rate, which is, that's why they're going for fixed exchange rate. The whole idea behind the pegged exchange rate is that so that your exchange rate remains more or less fixed, so that I can predict the future, so that I can know that if I produce 500 laptop in Thailand, I know at what price I can sell, how much I can earn. If I know the exchange rate, what will be the exchange rate 6 months later, 3 months later, I can predict how much I can earn, because your exchange rate is sort of fixed. So if there is no fluctuation, or if you can minimize the fluctuation, then that brings the stability, that brings the stability in the economy. If you want to import something after 2 months, maybe you are thinking of buying something. Let's say you want to produce something, then you are thinking of buying some components, some spare parts, some accessories. 2 months later, you know that how much price you will pay in Thai baht if you know the exchange rate. So if the exchange rate is fixed, it gives the certainty. So that way, the government wants to minimize the fluctuation in GDP. It wants to minimize the fluctuation in the exchange rate at the same time. Okay. But the problem is that if you want to stabilize the output, then you have to change the interest rate. Okay. So now in this case, so if the economy is here, what sort of interest rate is needed here? Can anybody tell me what sort of interest rate is needed here? Higher or lower? Lower, right? So you think that if economy is here, the interest rate should be lower here, okay? So that's why then, if you do that, what will happen? This part, if it is this part here, this part will look like, maybe instead of falling here, it will look like this, okay? It will follow the red line now. So that's how you minimize the fluctuation. By lowering the interest rate, you're pushing the output up as much as possible, obviously. But when you do that, when you are lowering the interest rate, then you have got the problem with E, the exchange rate. Your exchange rate will not remain fixed here. You're causing problem there. Okay? Then, the lowering E means your exchange rate will tend to depreciate. There's a pressure on your exchange rate, because at the lower, if you lower the R, people will leave the country. Okay? So lowering R, the lowering interest rate will make the deposit in that country less attractive. But your main concern is the GDP. But at the same time, you don't want to lose your investors as well. But when you lower R, the investors may withdraw their fund from the stock market, from the bond market, because there's a low return here. Okay? So that's why the government will have to make a choice here between stabilizing output versus keeping the exchange rate fixed. What you want to achieve? Do you want to achieve low fluctuation with variable exchange rate, or you want to maintain the exchange rate and don't touch the interest rate but allow the GDP to fall or to fluctuate? Okay? Because maintaining the peg can be costly. Meaning that if you want to maintain the peg, then maintaining the peg means you don't touch the interest rate, so that your exchange rate remains fixed here. But if you do that, you encounter this cost here. There's a big decline here, because you're not using the interest rate, monetary policy at all. Okay? So if you want to maintain the peg, then you sacrifice, you end up with low GDP. Or sometimes it could be even high GDP, because all opposite is also true. When you are here also you cannot use the interest rate here. So remember what I said, that you basically sacrifice your monetary autonomy here. You cannot use your money supply. Okay? So that is the creating problem. And when when the speculators they expect that the cost of maintaining peg is costly, when they think that this government will eventually will focus on GDP, it will not. It will not focus on exchange rate anymore. It will ultimately reduce the interest rate. Okay? If they expect that this interest rate will have to go down because the GDP fell sharply here, if they think that having this low GDP is costly, the government is becoming very unpopular. Okay? If they think that this government will reduce interest rate in future, then they will basically attack. So when they think that the maintaining peg is, the cost of maintaining peg is higher, it is becoming very costly because it is reducing your GDP significantly. Okay? So then the attack will happen. Okay? So, for example, suppose we are talking about a recession here. So we are talking about this part here, the recession part here. Okay? So suppose there is an adverse shock. So the economy is in recession, okay? So in this kind of situation, if the economy is in recession, the government can reduce the interest rate, as I said here. The government can reduce the interest rate to stimulate the aggregate demand, okay? So by stimulating the aggregate demand, the economy can come out of recession. So to avoid recession or to recover from the recession, let's say from the lowest point to move up, you basically need to lower the interest rate, okay? So that you can come out of recession. But however, if you reduce the interest rate, that means that the reduction in the interest rate means there will be a capital outflow. When the interest rate is low, people will take their money out of the country at a lower interest rate. So there will be a capital outflow and therefore your exchange rate will depreciate. So if you lower R, that will lead to the capital outflow, so your exchange rate will depreciate. So no longer you are having a fixed exchange rate. So that means you end up with a fluctuation in the exchange rate here. Okay, so the exchange rate can shoot up here like that. Okay, we have seen the overshooting. Okay, so your exchange rate will shoot up. Okay, just so that you can have some recovery here. To have the recovery here in GDP here. So to have the GDP recovery here, you are encountering this fluctuation in the E. Okay? So here we are talking about the two policy objectives is that whether you want to maintain fixed exchange rate or whether you want to stabilize the GDP, where you put your more importance. Okay? So clearly there is a trade-off, there is a conflict between the two. Okay? So the question is that which of the two options the government will decide, government will go for, okay, between the two, because it is very difficult to maintain both at the same time. So here you can see that there is no problem with the fiscal deficit here. We are not talking about fiscal deficit at all. We are just talking about the policy objective here, because we cannot, in that sense, we cannot blame the government, because stabilizing output is a good thing. It is not a bad thing that way, right? But maintaining fixed exchange rate also could be a good thing, okay? Okay, so now whether the government, so the easiest thing is that it is very difficult to sacrifice Y here. So we are talking about Y versus E here, right? So we are talking about Y versus E there, right? So most likely the government will go for Y, they will sacrifice E, okay? So whether the government will abandon peg, which is sacrifice E, or not will depend on the cost of maintaining the peg. Okay? If the cost of maintaining the peg means that if you maintain the fixed exchange rate here, if that causes this GDP to go down, number one, if there's a big drop, number one, and number two, if it happens for a long period of time, the recession, okay? If you have got the trend rate like that, your long run rate, and then GDP is falling for a long period of time, then it is going up, something like that. So if your GDP is going down for a long period of time, the duration is long, then possibly you say that no, this is too much. I cannot allow this to happen. I will rather go for this and I will sacrifice this. So it will depend. on the how low your GDP is and for how many years, how many months your GDP is at this low level. Because you have got a certain minimum that you can tolerate. Because remember, when the GDP is low, you are becoming, as a government, you are becoming more and more unpopular. Okay, people will make protests against you because of the low employment and so on. Okay, so the speculators also can understand that. If this is a concern for the government, the speculators also will think that, okay, if the government thinks that no, it cannot really sacrifice its GDP that much for that long, then the speculators also will use that information. Maybe they will say that, okay, this government is not happy about this low GDP, high unemployment, and the people are not happy. This government will ultimately abandon its exchange rate here, fixed exchange rate. Okay, it will not keep the exchange rate fixed here. Rather, it will go for recovery or the increase in GDP. So then, if they think that this government will abandon the exchange rate, then I will withdraw my currency before you abandon it. Because once when you abandon the fixed exchange rate, the exchange rate will depreciate. Okay? But before the exchange rate depreciates, I will leave the country. And when I leave the country, then the exchange rate will depreciate even further. So that is why it is a self-fulfilling. You think that the government will abandon the fixed exchange rate. You think that the government will abandon the pegged rate. The government will allow the exchange rate to go up. You think it will. Then, because of that expectation, you withdraw your investment. There is a capital outflow. Then, due to the capital outflow, the exchange rate actually depreciates. So the exchange rate is depreciating because of the capital outflow. Okay? But why there is a capital outflow? Because of the expectation about future. So you think that in future, your expected exchange rate, you think that the expected exchange rate will be higher. So you remember the midterm question. Remember, in the midterm question I said that when there is an expected, if you think that in future, the exchange rate will depreciate, why the exchange rate will depreciate today as well? So when expectation is that it will go up, then your actual exchange rate, the today's exchange rate also will go up. It's because of that capital outflow that I mentioned here. Because when you expect that, that will lead to the capital outflow. And capital outflow means the value of your currency will fall even today. So your exchange rate will depreciate today. So it's all to do with the expectation. That will cause the attack to happen. Okay? Now, then the question is that when this happens, why don't you just offer more interest, high interest rate? Because when I said that one way of solving it that, okay, you are telling, okay, don't take your money out, just I'm giving you a little bit of more interest as much as possible. Although the high interest, you said that, okay, the higher interest would have a negative impact on GDP, but at least you can avoid the currency crisis. So you are offering high interest. But we are telling no. By offering higher interest, you really cannot stop the crisis. Yes, you can invite your guests, you can give them lots of food, and so on. Or as I said that your partner, okay, you can offer them nice gifts, but even if you offer them high interest, it may not work. Okay? For the country. So we'll talk about that. So if the speculators, they expect that the government will abandon the peg, if they expect that this expected exchange rate will go up, which means that they are expecting a devaluation here. Okay? So this is called the expected devaluation rather than expected depreciation, right? So the reason is that we are talking about the fixed exchange rate, okay? So so far we talked about depreciation. So when you have got a flexible exchange rate, we call it depreciation, and here we call it devaluation. Okay, devaluation is under fixed system, fixed exchange rate. This is under flexible exchange rate. Okay, and what we call appreciation under flexible exchange rate, we call it revaluation. Okay, these are the terms we use. Okay, so if someone said that exchange rate has revalued, that means we are talking the fixed exchange rate. the country which follows a fixed exchange rate system, we call it devaluation and revaluation. If the country is following a flexible exchange rate system, we call it depreciation or appreciation. Okay? So that is the term we use. Okay? Okay. So because we are talking about the fixed exchange rate here, so if they think that in future the exchange rate will be devalued, the government will devalue the currency, then we call it the depreciation. And then the only way you can avoid this is to raise the interest rate. Okay? If you raise the interest rate, then my expectation will change. I say no. Okay, I expected depreciation or the devaluation, but because the interest rate is high, now the capital flow will stop. The capital outflow. Okay, so you can stop the capital outflow by raising the interest rate. Okay, so you can raise the interest rate to compensate for the expected devaluation. So there is expected devaluation here. So then you are offering the high interest rate here. So then possibly these two will cancel each other out. Okay. Right. So this is all what we have seen in terms of the IPC. Remember the interest parity condition? Okay, so if the expectation goes up on the right hand side and if you increase the interest rate on the left hand side, so they will remain equal again. Okay, so you're talking about the domestic interest. When the expectation goes up here, you offer higher domestic interest rate as well. So left hand side is equal to the right hand side in that IPC equation there. Okay, but then we say that however this may not work because increasing the interest rate will mean that your output will fall even further. So yes, you can stop the capital outflow here, but the higher interest rate will be costly for the economy. The reason is that when the interest rate is high, the most important thing that people reduce their consumption. Okay? At a high interest rate, you reduce your consumption, then your aggregate demand goes down. Okay? So then your aggregate demand is affected here. At a high interest rate, your consumption is down here, investment is down here, aggregate demand is down here. So therefore, your GDP is down here. Okay? So now you have to think how the speculators, what is happening here is that you are offering them high interest rate here, okay, to stop the capital outflow. So, just one second. So here, you are offering them more food here. You are making your house more attractive. They're like your guest. You are offering them high interest. You are offering them more food, better food, but you are offering them all these things at the cost of borrowing. For example, you borrow from your friend, you borrow from your parents, and then you are feeding your guest, which is not good. Because your guests, if they think, if you've got a guest who thinks that you are feeding them well by borrowing money from your neighbor, from your parents, from your relatives, then they think that, okay, you'll not be able to feed them like this in future. Because yes, you can borrow money once, you can borrow money twice, okay? But then I will know that, okay, this host, you as a host is not a good host because you cannot offer me this type of food for a long time. Because you're feeding me well by borrowing or by offering me high interest, by causing the problem in your GDP. Okay, so that is creating the problem here, okay? Then also, when you increase the interest rate here to stop the capital outflow, if you increase the interest rate, then that will increase the debt of the government because every government has got the debt, the national debt. And the national debt means that on the debt amount that you have got, now at a high interest, you have to pay high payment. Just your interest payment will be higher all on a sudden. It's just because you wanted to stop the outflow. You wanted to prevent the crisis. Now to prevent the crisis, you are creating another problem, the high public debt. Okay? And when you have got the high public debt, then the foreigners can read it as well. Okay? So they will say that, well, you are offering us high interest rate, that's fine, that's thank you very much. We are getting high interest, that's good, but you are creating debt there. That means, how long you can do that? There will be a point, you will stop it. And there will be a point, you will go bankrupt because of public debt. Okay? And if the government goes bankrupt because of this public debt, then the situation is even worse. So then, the high interest rate alone cannot encourage me to stay in that country. Because yes, high interest is a good thing for me, if I'm a foreign investor, or if I'm investing, or even the domestic citizen, investing in the domestic currency, if the interest rate is high, that is a good thing, that's okay. But if I know that it is at the cost of high public debt, because high interest rate means the government is paying high interest on its borrowing. Okay? Because the government borrows money everywhere, right? So then the significant amount of GDP will go just to pay for the debt. Significant amount of the tax revenue will go for paying the interest payment for the public debt. Okay? That's number one. Number two, it increases the financial pressure for the banks due to the unexpected increase in the interest rate. When the interest rate is high, because these commercial banks, they also borrow money. They don't do the business with their own money. So these commercial banks, they run their business by using your money. I mean, you as a savers, you as a depositors. So you put a deposit. When the interest rate is high, then they will offer high interest rate on the deposit as well. Okay? So people will be saving more. As I said, that people will consume less, but they will save more because they are consuming less. That's true at a high interest rate. But that savings will attract high interest. So that is a burden for the bank. Okay? So the bank will be in bad shape. So bank also have got lots of borrowed money from other institutions. So that will create a pressure on the balance sheet as well. Okay? And also we know that it will have an undesirable impact on the income distribution, in the sense that let's say there are two groups of people. Let's say on my left, you people don't own house, you rent. Okay? On the left hand side, you rent house, and the right hand side, you own house, which you rent. Okay? So one group of people, they own house, another group of people, they rent house. But if the interest rate goes up, will it affect the rent people? No, because you pay rent. But if you own a house, because you borrowed money to buy the house, now all of a sudden your mortgage payment has gone up. So among these two group of people, there will be some income distribution gap here. Okay? So this group will be worse off, whereas this group will not be affected by the increase in the interest rate. Okay? So it affects the mortgage payment. So there are many households which will be affected negatively because of the high interest rate, because of the high payment for your mortgage, for the money you have borrowed to buy the apartment. Okay? So that will cause the undesirable effect on the income distribution. And also, if you have got the interest rate going up, okay, then that will cause the real interest rate also go up. Because if the interest rate goes up, then if the inflation is constant, so your real interest rate is essentially, it is not the nominal interest rate you are raising here. So let's say your real interest rate is R is equal to nominal interest rate minus inflation. Okay? So if the inflation is sort of constant, when you are increasing this nominal interest rate, then your real interest rate goes up as well. Okay? So not only it is affecting the nominal interest rate, your real interest rate is also here quite expensive. So that means that will affect the investment as well. It will affect the investment decision, because as I said here, the investment will lower because the real cost of borrowing is higher here. Okay? And then lastly, if you devalue the exchange rate due to the speculation, if you say that, well, I'm devaluing the currency, it's not 28 baht anymore. Now every dollar is 35 baht. Okay, so if you make it 35 baht rather than 28 baht, maybe it will discourage some people not to buy dollar anymore, not to go for outflow of the currency. Okay, so you can devalue the exchange rate due to the speculative attack. So speculative attack in one country, you can do that. Okay, you can say that well, the $1 is now equal to 33 baht or 35 baht instead of 28 baht. But when you do that, the Singapore also will do the same thing. The Malaysia also will do the same thing. The other countries also will do the same thing. So then by devaluing your currency, you really cannot stop it to happen, because when other countries are also devaluing their currency, if they also take the action, then possibly it will not have any significant impact overall, because it is not only your country is getting devalued, other currencies also getting devalued at the same time. So they will cancel each other. Okay? Okay. So in other words, what we can say here is that if you increase the interest rate here, that will increase the cost of maintaining pay even further, because if you increase the interest rate here, this interest rate, then that will cause all these problems here I mentioned here. All these problems are related to the interest rate. So not only the high interest rate is bad for GDP, it is bad for all these things as well. Okay? So the maintaining just to maintain the fixed interest rate, or just to attract the foreigners, or just to stop the outflow, if you raise the interest rate, then you encounter not only the lower GDP. Yes, the main thing is the lower GDP, but also there are other problems associated with the higher interest rate. So the high interest rate can have a detrimental impact, not just GDP. It is causing in other areas as well. Okay, so that's why maintaining the peg is very costly, not only because of GDP, but also because of all other impact that I have discussed here. Okay, and because of all these things, the speculators, they also know that. If you can calculate, I can calculate the cost of maintaining fixed exchange rate. If I can calculate the cost of increasing R, then speculators also will calculate the cost of increasing R. When they see that this is very costly, the increasing interest rate is becoming costly for the whole economy, everybody somehow is getting affected, then they can also, speculators also can see that. And when they see that this cost is too high, then they think that, okay, it is too costly, the government is raising it, but it cannot keep its promise. It cannot maintain this interest rate because of all those costs. So then they will attack. Okay, it is all about their expectation. If they think that this increase in R is very costly for everything, then they will attack and the peg will break, basically, meaning that your exchange rate will no longer be fixed. Okay? Okay, so in that sense, someone said that it may prove to be counterproductive here. It could be counterproductive. Counterproductive means if you increase the interest rate, you can maintain the peg for some time, but you will encounter all these A, B, C, D problems, the GDP problem, then the public debt problem, the mortgage problem. You encounter all these problems. Then after a few months, you give up. You basically you don't go for any more higher interest rate. So you have done it, you raise the interest rate, but you could not please the speculators, the outflow, you could not stop the outflow, and you could not address your GDP problem, public debt problem, rather you have created other problem. Okay? So that means it could be counterproductive. Okay? You can use it, but overall impact is negative here. Okay, and so here what we are seeing here, that's how it is different from the first generation model, because first generation model talks about very specific three things, that okay, if you have got these three things, there will be a crisis, very specific first generation model. But the second generation model is very difficult to predict, because it says that there is a lot will depend on the expectation, how they see it. Okay, the two countries having same inflation. Let's say Thailand has got, let's say, 30% inflation, let's say, and Zimbabwe, they have got 50% inflation, for example. So which currency will be attacked? If in Thailand you have got 30% inflation, in Zimbabwe you have got 50% inflation, which currency will be attacked, do you think? Thailand or Zimbabwe? Anyone any idea? If Thailand has got 30% inflation, or the Thailand has got the fall in GDP, let's say the Thai GDP fell by 5% and Zimbabwe's GDP fell by 12%. So there's a big gap in both countries. In one country, Thailand is 5% drop, in Zimbabwe it is 12% drop. So in which country do you think the currency will be attacked? Thailand or Zimbabwe? Why? Why Zimbabwe? What's the reason? Because Zimbabwe has got a past history of having low GDP, high inflation. We know that. So it has become a normal for Zimbabwe now. Okay? So if you have got a 20% inflation here, it is a big news here. But in Zimbabwe, even if you have got 50%, even 60% inflation, it is not news because they have experienced 200% inflation before. Okay? So that's why it is the expectation. It is not about, you cannot say that this number is bad. It is about how I feel, whether this number is high or whether this is bad enough for the economy or not. So sometimes the 10% could be bad enough, but 20% might be quite okay in some cases, okay? So that's why a lot will depend on the expectation, okay? So the changes in the expectation can give rise to the different outcome, okay? So if the expectation change, then outcome will be different. If my expectation is that there will be a rain during the weekend and people will buy, the price of umbrella will go up, if that is my expectation, then obviously everybody will buy umbrella today and price will go up. But by the same token, if I expect that no, it will not rain, if I expect that it will not rain during the weekend, the price of umbrella will not go up. But the weekend will come in any way. It is your expectation. What you are expecting about the weekend. Will it rain or will it not rain? Okay? So our expectation will make it happen basically. So the crisis may happen or crisis may not happen depending on the expectation. Meaning that if there is a 20% inflation, do you consider 20% inflation is a very high or okay? It is that expectation is causing the problem. Some people will say 20%, okay, fine. The government can manage it. Some people will say, no, 20% is very high. This government will not be able to manage this high inflation. So they will quit. Okay? So when I say they, I am talking about big players. Like, you heard about George Soros, right? You heard about Warren Buffett, right? So these are the people. What they think. Well, they will not think. You will make them think because you will work for those companies. Okay? Because the students, the bright students from economics, they work for these companies where they bet. It's like a betting, gambling, right? So you put a bet. You put a bet that this currency will depreciate tomorrow. And then you put 100 million there. Then you take out 100 million from that currency and you put it in the foreign currency. Because if I know that Thai baht will depreciate by 5% tomorrow, today I can take 10 million from Thai baht, I put it into dollar, and tomorrow, if that happens actually, then I will buy the same Thai baht